If you've been praying the rosary every day, but your home still feels heavy, like peace never stays for long, please listen closely. Have you ever finished a full rosary and then suddenly realized your lips were praying, but your mind was fighting 100 worries from start to finish? And what if the reason nothing seems to change isn't that God isn't listening, but that you've been praying in a way that leaves you without your shield in spiritual battle? Give me just 3 minutes. I'm going to point out one very specific mistake that quietly weakens the rosary, and one simple adjustment that can bring you back into the right place. Because this isn't about you being not holy enough. It's not that God is disappointed in you. And this is not a sermon meant to weigh you down with guilt. This is a warning, and it's also protection. So many of us are carrying more than we ever say out loud. You're holding your family together. You're worrying about money. You're chasing doctor visits, medications, school schedules, work responsibilities. You're trying to stay calm, trying to stay gentle, while inside you feel stretched to the breaking point. And at night, when the house finally gets quiet, you reach for the beads, not because you have extra time, but because somewhere deep down, you still believe Mary can hold what you don't have the strength to hold anymore. But lately, the prayers have started to feel muted, not because the rosary has lost its holiness, but because something very quiet has been happening. Padre Pio, who spent his entire life in prayer and in spiritual warfare, didn't see the rosary as a good habit for the spiritually strong. He saw it as a weapon for the days when we are weakest. And what weighs on my heart is this: a weapon isn't powerful just because it's a weapon. A soldier can carry the best equipment and still be wounded if he doesn't know how to hold it. The rosary is the same. You can say every prayer, you can move through every bead, but if your heart isn't in the right posture, it's like stepping out into the rain without fastening your coat. So here's the line I want you to hold on to right now. You haven't failed. You're just exposed. You haven't been abandoned by God. You're not being punished. You're exhausted. And when you're exhausted, the enemy doesn't need to do anything dramatic. He only needs to do one thing: turn your prayer into noise instead of an encounter. And it usually begins with a sign so small that many Catholics don't even recognize it. There are 3 common traps that quietly drain the rosary's strength, and most people never realize it. And the second trap is the one that hits the busiest mothers the hardest. The first trap is numbness, prayer becoming routine. You still pray, but you pray the way you do a task that has to get done. It's like turning on a lamp, but your eyes have gotten so used to the dark that you don't even notice the light anymore. Not because you're lazy, not because you don't love Mary, but because when a soul has been under pressure for too long, it protects itself by going numb. You say the prayers, but your heart doesn't answer anymore. That's why you keep praying, but you don't feel any relief. You keep asking, but your home still feels tense. You keep holding the beads, but your heart still feels on edge. In a moment, I'm going to tell you what that sign is. But before we go on, I want to place everything we're talking about under Mary's protection, following the spirit Padre Pio lived in. Before we continue, if you believe in the power of the rosary and you're ready to hear what Padre Pio revealed, type this in the comments: Mary, pray for us. That's not for engagement. It's a small sign of prayer, like gently taking Mary's hand and saying, I'm here. And now, I'm going to speak plainly. You finish the rosary, but when you set it down, you still feel empty, like you just spoke to someone who was very far away. In the next part, I'll show you a very simple way to recognize whether you've slipped into that numbness trap. And then the second trap is something almost everyone faces, especially in a home that's never truly quiet. It's being pulled apart by too many things at once. The TV is still on. Your phone keeps buzzing, kids calling your name, work messages, bills, doctor appointments, one sentence from your husband that hits a sore place. You're holding the beads, but your mind is being tugged in 10 different directions. So your mouth is saying, Hail Mary, while inside you're answering a life that keeps demanding, handle it, hurry up. And in just 1 minute, I'm going to give you a rescue sentence, one single line, so that every time distraction hits, you won't feel like you failed. You'll know how to turn the distraction itself into prayer. And then, the third trap shows up in a very polite way. It doesn't break you with noise, it breaks you with hurry. You pray just a little faster so you can get it done. You move through the words like someone running past his mother's door, barely able to say, Hi, Mom, before disappearing. Not because you don't respect Mary, but because you're tired. You just want to finish something good before you collapse into sleep. You just want to check it off so the guilt eases for a moment. But Padre Pio, who knew spiritual warfare is in theory, saw something painful and true. When prayer becomes rushed breath, the words don't have time to reach the heart, you can make it all the way through the beads and still leave your heart standing outside the door. And here's the paradox that shocks a lot of people. 1 decade prayed well can be stronger than an entire rosary prayed in a hurry. It sounds backwards, but think about it in a simple human way. A 10-minute phone call where you are truly there, listening, speaking from the heart, is worth more than a 30-minute call where your mind is doing something else. Every mother understands that. You don't need your child to say a lot, you just need your child to be present. Mary is the same, and if you're wondering right now, okay, so which mistake am I actually making? I want to frame it clearly so you can recognize yourself without shame. Most of the time, there are 4 common ways the rosary quietly gets thinned out without us realizing. First, mechanical prayer. Your mouth is moving, but your heart isn't there. Second, distraction. The prayers get torn apart by worries, noise, your phone, responsibilities. Third, hurry, racing to finish, losing the reverent pace. Fourth, no meditation, saying the prayers but never stepping into the mystery. And here's the most important part. Not everyone struggles with all 4, but each one needs a different remedy. So the real question isn't, am I a bad person? The real question is, which one is mine? So I can repair the right place. Some people think they're lacking faith, when what they're really missing is a way to anchor the mind. Some people think their prayer doesn't work, when what's really happening is that they've been praying in a rushed rhythm. And now I want you to understand something older videos often say in a way that's too vague. Why does meditation make the rosary stronger? Not to keep you from being bored, not to make it feel more beautiful. Meditation works like a mechanism, a very simple, very practical mechanism. When you meditate, 3 things happen at the same time. You anchor your attention in a sacred scene, so your mind doesn't keep running. You awaken holy feeling, so the words carry weight instead of floating past you, and you give your intention a direction, so your prayer doesn't scatter and fade. Padre Pio understood this deeply. He didn't pray like he was reading a script. He prayed like he was standing before a reality. And this is where holy imagination becomes so important. That word, imagination, can make people uncomfortable. But this isn't making things up. This is how the heart steps into the gospel. You're not trying to create something that isn't there. You're asking for the grace to be there. So for just 10 seconds, I want you to try something. Right now, choose one small detail from one mystery, just one detail. For example, Mary's eyes as she hears the angel's greeting. The simplicity of the room, the silence right before she says, "Let it be done," or the slight trembling of her hands as she holds the child, just one detail. Hold that detail like an anchor, and every time you say Hail Mary, return to that anchor. You'll be surprised what happens. Your mind runs less, the words stop sliding past, and your heart starts answering again. That's why one decade prayed the right way can be stronger than an entire rosary prayed in a rush. And now back to Angela. She's the kind of woman so many American Catholic mothers recognize immediately. Busy, stressed, always something to solve, always someone who needs her. She still prays the rosary, but it feels silent. And what changed for her wasn't what you would expect. Not a loud miracle, not every problem disappearing overnight, but there was a very small sign, a sign only people who truly step into prayer tend to notice. And in a moment, I'm going to tell you what that sign was. And here is that small sign. Not that you hear a strange voice, not that you see something dramatic. The real sign is much more subtle. It's when you've prayed just a few Hail Marys, and suddenly you realize you're here. Not here in your kitchen, but here in the prayer. You're no longer just sliding your fingers along the beads. You catch a quiet moment, as if something inside you gently closed a door and all the noise was left outside. Angela said to herself, just a few seconds, but I'm not being swept away. And right there, she understood something she'd never considered before. Maybe the rosary isn't silent. Maybe she just hadn't known how to turn her presence back on. Padre Pio didn't call this a secret technique. He didn't make prayer complicated to frighten people. He taught like a spiritual father protecting his children in the middle of a battle. I call it a shield, not because it's mystical, but because it helps you stand in the right posture so grace can flow without being blocked. And it's simple. It's 5 steps. 5 steps not to make you busier, but to keep the rosary from becoming words that drift away and to make it an encounter. Stay with me, because the 3rd step is where many people finally feel the rosary turn on. Not loudly, but truly. The 1st step begins before you say a single word. Just 30 seconds. I know, you're busy. You might be in the car. You might be washing dishes. You might be in bed with your eyes already heavy. But Padre Pio understood, if you jump right in, your mind is still running with the whole day. So before you begin, take one slow breath, then another. Not to meditate, but to remind your heart, I'm stepping into something holy. Then offer one simple sentence. Mary, I'm here. Lord, help me pray. Holy Spirit, guide me. Just one sentence. Those 30 seconds are like turning down the noise in a room before you listen to someone you love. And the surprising thing is, that alone can make your mind stop shouting as much. Not because your life suddenly has no problems, but because you've brought yourself back into the right place. The 2nd step is what busy mothers skip most often. One clear intention, not vague, not please make everything okay. One sentence, specific. Because when your intention is unclear, your mind goes searching, and it searches through anxiety. But when your intention is clear, your heart has somewhere to rest. Use simple words the way a real mother speaks. Mary, please keep peace in my home today. Please pray for my son, that he comes back to what's right. Help me not collapse under what I'm carrying. Please pray over this illness, so I don't live in fear. Do you see? No fancy language, just truth. Padre Pio didn't need you to perform holiness. He needed you to be honest. And now we come to the 3rd step, the step that makes the rosary stop feeling like words and start feeling like a living scene. You've heard me say holy imagination, but here it's simpler than you think. You don't have to imagine an entire movie. You only have to lock your mind into one scene, using one detail. One scene, one detail. For example, when you're meditating on the Annunciation, don't try to picture everything. Hold just one thing, Mary's eyes, the stillness of the room, the moment right before she says, let it be done. Then you pray. Every time you say Hail Mary, you return to that one detail, And if your mind runs, don't scold yourself. Just come back, like a mother guiding her child across the street when the child looks everywhere. She doesn't let go, and she doesn't scream. She simply tightens her grip and keeps walking. And this is where many people feel it for the first time. I'm not just speaking, I'm standing before something holy. The rosary begins to carry weight, not because you're praying more, but because you're inside it. The fourth step is the pace. Padre Pio never taught people to drag prayer out endlessly, but he also would not let prayer become rush breath. You go slowly enough that you can actually hear yourself, that each word has somewhere to land. Think of the prayers like knocking at a door, not pounding, not tapping as you run past, but knocking like a child standing at his mother's door, knowing she's there. And here's a very practical test. If you're praying so fast that you can't clearly hear your own words, you're rushing. You don't have to count seconds. You only have to listen. Because when you can hear what you're saying, your heart can follow. And in the next minute, I'm going to tell you what Padre Pio understood so well. Why a slow pace, a clear intention, and a locked scene create a real shield. And why, when you feel the weakest, that's often when the rosary can become strongest. And there's something else most people don't realize. Those 4 steps, 30 seconds to settle in, a clear intention, locking into one scene, and a paced rhythm with weight, are only how you stand correctly while holding the weapon. But Padre Pio taught one more thing, very quietly. If you want to know whether your prayer is truly entering real life, watch what happens after you set the beads down, because grace rarely arrives like thunder. Most of the time, it comes like one small step, a small step, but you have to be awake enough to recognize that grace is knocking. This is the 5th step. I call it micro-obedience. One small act after the rosary, not to earn points, but because real prayer doesn't only calm your heart, it usually leads to something very concrete, something you're meant to do. Sometimes it's an apology you've been postponing. Sometimes it's turning off your phone for 10 minutes so you don't feed your anger. Sometimes it's walking into your child's room, sitting down and saying, "Mom is here." Very small. But that's the sign grace is working. Because the enemy often tries to convince you prayer alone is enough. And then you pray, and you return to the same old rhythm, the same reactions, the same words. Padre Pio didn't teach us that. He understood prayer is an encounter, and a real encounter usually changes the way you step out of the room. So if, after the rosary, you feel a small pull towards something good, don't ignore it. Do the small thing. Grace often arrives as one small step, and that's how you know you're not just saying prayers. You're being led. But right now, I know some of you are already exhaling and thinking, "That sounds beautiful, but I get distracted constantly. I can't do it." Please hear this because it will lift weight off your shoulders. Distraction is not failure, and you do not have to be perfect to be protected. If anyone understood that, it was Padre Pio. Spiritual battle doesn't wait for your free time. It often shows up the moment you kneel, the moment you try to pray. So when distraction hits, the important thing isn't to scold yourself. The important thing is to recognize, I'm in a battle, and to know how to stand your ground. And here's the first hack. Very practical, especially for busy people. When a worry breaks in, don't try to shove it away like trash. Do the opposite. Name it and offer it. For example, you're praying Hail Mary, and your mind jumps to the mortgage, the prescriptions, the bills. You simply whisper inside your heart, I offer this fear. I offer this worry about money. Mary, please hold what I can't hold. Then you keep praying. Do you see what that does? It turns distraction from a hand pulling you out of prayer into something you place into Mary's hands. It turns an attack into fuel. You're no longer being led by the worry. you lead the worry into prayer. And if you're the kind of person praying while doing housework, listening to videos, keeping an eye on kids, the second hack will make you breathe easier. I call it the anchor bead. Choose one bead in each decade, just one, as your reminder. Every time your fingers touch that bead, you return to one short line. Mary, keep me present. I'm here. Hold me here. Nothing complicated. An anchor bead is like tying a string around your wrist, so you don't forget what matters. Simple, but effective. Because busy people don't need more rules. Busy people need a point of support. And now the third hack, one that frees a lot of people from guilt. You won't always be able to pray the entire rosary. Some nights you're exhausted. Some days you have only a few minutes before your child calls, your phone rings, or another problem crashes in. Padre Pio didn't want you to treat the rosary like an exam. He wanted you to treat it like a lifeline. So remember this: one decade prayed well is still real. One decade where you are present, you have an intention, you're locked into the scene, you keep a steady rhythm, is still an encounter. Don't let ideal life kill real life. You don't live in a quiet monastery. You live in a home with clattering dishes, children's voices, buzzing phones, and anxious thoughts. And right there, the rosary is meant to become a shield. One decade in real life is worth more than a full rosary in an ideal life you can never reach. But there's one more thing. When you begin to pray this way, a very gentle sign starts to appear. Not a big miracle, just a moment when you realize, this time, I didn't get pulled as far away as I usually do. And that's when you know. The rosary is returning to its true strength. And in the next part, I'm going to share a kind of proof that's very ordinary, nothing showy, so you can see how peace can come back into a home. Little by little. There's a kind of proof people often overlook because it doesn't shock you. It doesn't turn into a dramatic story you can't stop telling, but it's real. And it often begins in ordinary kitchens, crowded living rooms, and rushed mornings when everyone is busy. I know a group of mothers like that, not extra holy women, not women with lots of free time. If you looked at their calendars, you'd see nothing but responsibilities, kids, school, work, doctor appointments, days when you're exhausted and still have to get up and cook dinner. They decided to set aside a very small window each day to pray the rosary, using the approach we've been talking about. Not to prove they were good at it, not to earn some kind of spiritual achievement, only because they could feel something in their homes was wearing them down, and they needed a shield. And what was strange was this. Outside, life was still chaotic. The news was still heavy. The bills still showed up. The kids still had rough days. Someone was still sick. But on the inside, a quiet calm began to grow. Not the kind of peace where nothing is wrong. More like this. You walk into a noisy room, but there's still a small corner inside you that stays lit. One mother said, almost in a whisper, "I don't know how to explain it, but after I pray, I blow up less." Another one said, "I still worry, but the worry doesn't drag me around the way it used to." Those sentences sound simple, but if you've lived under stress for years, you know that isn't small. And I want you to notice something. None of them said everything disappeared. No, that's why this matters. It doesn't promise what isn't true. It simply shows you what is true. The first change usually isn't in the situation, it's in the soul. And when the soul begins to change, the situation finally has room to change too. But I'm not going to finish that story yet, because if you're listening, you might be thinking, that's beautiful, but that's them. What about me? So let's go back to Angela. In her first week of using these simple steps, she still had some very hard nights. Some nights she could only pray one decade. Some nights she was praying while her child called for her, Her phone buzzed, and irritation rose up. But one thing was different. She broke less. On the third day, she noticed a small sign. Right before an argument was about to explode, she had a pause. Just 1 second. But that 1 second was enough to stop her from saying the sentence that would make everything worse. On the 7th day, she noticed a second sign. She began sleeping a little deeper. Not because life suddenly got easier, but because her mind stopped running in panic at night. The worries were still there, but they no longer took up all the space. Do you see? This is what a shield looks like in Padre Pio's world. Not always a visible miracle, but a very specific protection. You keep your peace long enough so you don't get pulled into despair. You have enough clarity to choose what's right. And I want you to hear this deeply. In spiritual warfare, protection often looks like clarity. Not a blinding light, just enough light to take the right step instead of the wrong one. When the enemy wants to win, he doesn't need you to do something evil right away. He only needs you to be worn out. He only needs you to react on instinct. He only needs you to believe there's no hope. So when the Rosary helps you stand a little longer, keeps your head a little clearer, keeps your heart a little steadier, that's already a real victory. And now I want to close the mystery box I opened earlier. The first sign you're praying the Rosary the wrong way usually isn't that you said the words incorrectly. It's this: you set the beads down, and you can't remember which mystery you were meditating on. You can't remember what intention you offered. You only remember that you finished. If that's true for you, please don't panic. It doesn't make you a bad person. It's simply a signal that your mind was pulled away from the encounter. And here's a very simple test you can do tonight. You don't need the whole Rosary, just 1 decade. Before you begin, speak one clear intention, then choose one small detail in the mystery as your anchor, and pray slowly enough that you can hear yourself. After that 1 decade, stop for 2 seconds and ask yourself, do I remember where I just was? Do I remember what I just offered? If you can remember even a little, then you've just touched what Padre Pio was trying to give you. Not a technique to show off, but a path for the Rosary to return to its true strength. And in the next part, I'm going to tell you the first sign you're praying the right way. It's even gentler than you think. So what is the first sign you're praying the Rosary the right way? It's not that a miracle happens instantly. It's not that all your problems disappear. It's not that you suddenly feel more holy. The sign is so small you could miss it, especially if you're waiting for something big. It's this: after 1 decade, you notice a thin, quiet pocket of peace inside you. A peace that doesn't make life easy, but it's enough to keep you from reacting the way you used to. Your kids are still loud. The texts, the bills, the appointments are still there. But instead of being pulled immediately, you have a pause, just a pause. And in that pause, you choose what's right. You choose silence instead of the sentence that would wound. You choose a breath instead of an explosion. You choose to ask for help instead of slipping into despair. A lot of people think grace should show up as a change in circumstances, but very often grace shows up first as something else, a softening inside you, and that's when grace begins to move. Not loudly, not dramatically, but truly. If you want to know you're on the right path, watch this. When you're praying the Rosary the right way, you don't necessarily stop worrying, but you start worrying differently. Worry stops being a whip that drives you. It becomes something you bring to Mary and lay down. The battle is still there, but you're not fighting it alone anymore. And this is where many people get stuck. They hear this and say, I get it. Then they wait for a perfect day to start, but busy mothers almost never get a perfect day. Padre Pio didn't need you to have a perfect day. He only needed you to take the right posture and begin inside real life. So instead of a heavy plan, hold on to something light. Tonight, or whenever you can, don't try to do a lot, just do it well. Just 1 decade if that's all you have. 30 seconds to settle in. One clear intention. One detail from the mystery as your anchor. A pace slow enough that you can hear your own words. And then one small act of micro-obedience afterward. One small good thing you feel drawn to do. That's how you keep the rosary in real life, not ideal life. Some days you'll be able to do more. Some days you'll only be able to do less. But what matters isn't the amount. What matters is that every time you touch the beads, you're learning how to be present. And if you ask, what does that actually change? I'll say it simply. You start realizing peace isn't just a feeling. Peace is a way of standing steady. It's like walking into your house on a stormy day. The air outside is still cold, but you finally have shelter. And I want you to remember this, especially when you fail, when you get distracted, when you're tired. You do not have to be perfect for Mary to care for you. You only have to return, just return, this time with your heart. If there's one thing I hope you carry after all these minutes, it's this. The enemy wants you to believe prayer is useless because you can't do it right. You don't have to be perfect. You only have to be present. And tonight, just 1 decade. Padre Pio wanted you to believe the opposite. Prayer has power when you come with honesty and presence. And tonight, when you pick up the beads, you don't have to prove anything. Just whisper, Mary, I'm here, and begin. Even 1 decade is enough, because sometimes what opens the door isn't a hard push. It's a gentle knock at the right rhythm. And to close, I want to leave you with 3 simple lines as a reminder for the days you feel weak.